Imagine following a dangerously attractive man straight into his bedroom, not for romance, but to force him to reveal a murderer's name. After her sibling is brutally killed, Hayeon's obsession with revenge leads her straight into a deadly trap. She's saved by Yuseong, a towering, muscular giant with piercing mismatched eyes who demands she drop the case. But he's hiding a dark secret, and he clearly knows exactly who the killer is. Driven to the absolute edge, she corners him in his room, faced with his brutally scarred physique, and delivers a twisted ultimatum. Help me get my revenge, or watch me die right in front of you. Uncover the brutal truth behind his scars, and watch how far she'll go to get her revenge. In a secluded pool beneath the night sky, a hooded, tattoo-covered man reclines in the water while a dark-haired woman named Megan catches her breath against him. Her boss speaks through the phone, asking whether she's still broken over the fallen girl and reminding her that the job left no other option. Megan strokes the unconscious man's hair and insists she never meant to take a life. The client loved the photographs and paid generously, but her boss coldly orders her to stop grieving. Megan's smile strains as she's told to move on from an emotion she barely understands. The encounter in the pool turns frantic as Megan admits that only two thrills make her feel alive: executing a contract and losing herself in deep passion. Her partner hesitates, disturbed by how far she wants to push things, but she refuses to slow down. Water crashes over the tiles while her laughter rises into the night. Then the mood turns ominous. A shoe lies beside a spreading dark trail at the pool's edge, revealing that whatever thrill Megan chased has ended with someone else falling silent forever. 2 months later, Hayeon slams both hands onto a police desk, her dark hair trembling around a face tight with anger. She demands to know how much longer she's expected to wait when detectives keep repeating the same excuses. The officer says they traced the projectiles to Switzerland, requested cooperation from the manufacturer, and are still searching every route for the culprit. Hayeon's fingers shake against the wood. Promises of progress mean nothing when the man who struck down her sister is still free. The officer asks Hayeon to wait until investigators obtain a list of Korean buyers, but her patience finally snaps. With tears gathering beneath furious eyes, she points out that a violent incident happened in Korea, the culprit's uncovered face was caught on camera, and the authorities still have no real lead. The detective reluctantly admits the attacker may belong to a shadow organization that even international forces have failed to dismantle. Hayeon rises with her fists clenched and vows that, legal or not, she'll make her sister's attacker meet the same fate. A case report names Kim Jong-sik and warns that the group behind him uses a praying, winged emblem and silences witnesses without hesitation. The detective believes knowing the truth may only leave Hayeon more powerless. Later, beneath a bright moon, she walks alone while gripping a photo of herself beside her blonde younger sister, Nayeon. Her brows pinch with grief as she promises to find the man responsible and make him suffer in return. Then a terrified voice from a nearby alley begs for mercy, and Hayeon freezes mid-step. Inside the blue-lit alley, 3 men surround a trembling schoolgirl and harass her while mocking her fear. One grips her arm and warns that resistance will only make things worse. Another leans close, eager to humiliate her further. The girl's shoulders curl inward as she pleads for them to stop. Hearing their laughter, Hayeon's grief ignites into fury. She charges from the darkness, slams into one attacker, and calls them worthless trash, refusing to watch another helpless girl be broken in front of her. Hayeon plants herself between the girl and the attackers, fists raised despite the fear tightening her face. She tells them they're no better than the scoundrel who destroyed her family and declares she won't let them do whatever they want. The rescued girl stammers her thanks, but one thug wipes his mouth and challenges Hayeon to a clash. She lunges first, only for his boot to crash into her body. Hayeon folds around the impact, and another blow sends her down hard as dark marks stain the pavement. Standing over Hayeon, the attacker sneers that she'll pay for interfering and threatens to force his will upon her next. She tries to lift herself, but her bruised limbs barely respond. Her ruined clothes and the abandoned school uniform nearby make the danger brutally clear. Pain pulses through her body while frustration burns hotter than fear. If she can't defeat a few alley thugs, she wonders how she could ever face the dangerous man who took Nayeon. Even so, her fingers scrape against the stones, still trying to rise. The men crowd around the fallen Hayeon, discussing how to humiliate her while one raises a phone to record everything. She forces out a weak curse, but they laugh at what little strength remains. One grips her shoulder and promises to keep going until she's completely ruined. Hayeon's eyes fill with shame and rage. She came here believing revenge made her strong, yet she can't even protect herself from ordinary predators. Still thinking of Nayeon, she refuses to surrender inside, even as her body fails her. As the lead thug prepares to cross the ultimate line with Hayeon, a furious voice cuts through the alley and demands to know what they're doing. The men turn, and one is instantly dropped by a strike too fast to follow. Another charges, but the newcomer slips inside his swing with terrifying calm. A single vivid blue eye flashes beneath tousled black hair before several precise impacts hammer the attacker backward. Hayeon watches through blurred vision as the stranger dismantles the group with effortless, disciplined precision. The last thug is launched across the alley, and silence falls around the scattered bodies. The towering stranger stands with his back to Hayeon, dressed entirely in black, his broad frame untouched by the struggle. Through half-closed eyes, she focuses on the icy blue iris that shines against his otherwise unreadable face. Beautiful is the only word her exhausted mind can find. She whispers for him to save her, and Yuseong answers without explanation by lifting her into his arms. As consciousness fades, Hayeon's final plea becomes a broken request for him to save her from herself. Beneath the cold blue night, Kwon Yuseong carries the unconscious Lee Hayeon away from the alley, her limp body cradled against his black-clad chest. His mismatched eyes stay forward as he crosses the apartment grounds, leaving the defeated attackers behind. Hayeon's phone slips unnoticed onto the stones, its screen glowing beneath his boot before cracking under his next step. Yuseong doesn't pause. He simply keeps walking with the wounded stranger in his arms, taking her somewhere hidden from the authorities and the men she provoked. Warm daylight fills an unfamiliar bedroom as a blonde woman carefully cleans the cut above Hayeon's brow. She explains that the wound isn't deep and shouldn't scar if treated properly. Hayeon stirs with a pained groan, and the woman offers pain medicine after she eats. Through blurred eyes, Hayeon sees long blonde hair and a gentle face that resembles the sister she lost. Her breath catches. She whispers Nayeon's name, then lunges from the bed and wraps both arms around the startled woman. Hayeon sobs against the blonde woman's shoulder, confessing that she thought Nayeon had been taken from her and lost forever. The woman strokes her dark hair and softly reminds her that it was only a dream, allowing the grief to pour out. From the doorway, Yuseong watches in silence before telling Reina to feed their guest once she wakes fully. Hayeon finally looks up at the imposing man and asks who he is. Reina steadies her by the shoulders and explains that the stranger across the room is Kwon Yuseong. Reina gently recounts the previous night's disaster and says Hayeon is fortunate Yuseong found her in time. Still dazed, Hayeon introduces herself and thanks them both for saving her, her fingers touching the bandage near her eye. Yuseong remains by the window with his arms folded, his expression cool and unreadable. Reina urges Hayeon not to push herself and to rest longer, but the memory of the alley has already returned. Gratitude softens Hayeon's face for only a moment before the question of her sister hardens it again. When Reina mentions Hayeon's confused talk about someone being struck down, Hayeon grips the blanket and admits that her younger sister was taken 3 months earlier. She's been searching for the culprit ever since. Yuseong asks what she plans to do if she finds him, and Hayeon's eyes flare with certainty. She'll repay him in exactly the same way he hurt Nayeon. The answer sounds obvious to her, but Yuseong's jaw tightens, as if he's hearing the beginning of another tragedy rather than a promise of justice. Yuseong turns toward the door and tells Hayeon to give up. He doubts she'll ever find the culprit, and even if she does, there's nothing she can safely accomplish. He calls Nayeon's loss a tragedy, but insists Hayeon should forget revenge, move on, and find another reason to live. Her sister, he adds, wouldn't want her to fall miserably chasing retaliation. Hayeon's body goes rigid. She springs from the bed despite her injuries and demands to know whether he already knows the person responsible. Hayeon rushes after Yuseong, ignoring Reina's warning that bruises still cover her body and even walking will be difficult. Her knees buckle, but she insists. She's fine and needs one more conversation. Reina reluctantly guides her down the hall to Yuseong's room, promising to ask him to come out. Patience breaks first. Hayeon throws the door open and repeats her question, only to stop short when she finds Yuseong shirtless, his massive torso carved with numerous long, intense scars. The scars crossing Yuseong's chest and back make Hayeon's breath stall, but his answer hits harder. Yes, he knows who the culprit is. Standing calmly with a shirt in hand, he treats the confession like a fact that belongs only to him. Hayeon demands the name and promises to report everything to the authorities immediately. Her palms open in urgent appeal while Reina watches from behind. Yuseong's gaze stays flat. Whether he shares that information, he says, is entirely his decision. Hayeon's shock turns to outrage. A violent act took innocent lives, so anyone with information should cooperate and help secure justice. She demands every detail he knows. Yuseong quietly suggests the attacker may be one of many shadow operatives, and involving the authorities would only create more casualties. That's why he told her to forget the case. Hayeon grabs at him before he can finish dressing and asks whether he's some kind of outlaw, or perhaps the culprit himself. His secrecy makes every possibility feel dangerous. Clinging to Yuseong's arm, Hayeon insists she isn't asking him to take revenge or hunt anyone on her behalf. She only wants the truth. Yuseong stares down at her in heavy silence before admitting that yes, even that is difficult. If another person learns what he knows and falls because of him, he can't bear the guilt. Too many losses already weigh on his scarred shoulders. Reina stands motionless in the doorway, hands clasped at her chest, while Hayeon realizes his refusal is rooted in fear rather than indifference. Yuseong warns that merely being identified as someone who knows the culprit could give the organization enough motive to silence Hayeon too. He pulls on a dark shirt, turning away as though the conversation is finished. Then a piece of steel lying on the nearby bench catches Hayeon's eye. She snatches the weapon up and presses it against herself, tears shining beneath a furious stare. If Yuseong won't help her, she declares that she'll end it all right in front of him. His head snaps around. Hayeon has found the one threat his guilt may not let him ignore. Hayeon's threat fills the room as she holds the weapon steady and swears she'll leave this world if Yuseong refuses to help. Reina recoils in horror, but Yuseong's detached mask finally cracks. He demands to know what Hayeon thinks she's doing, his body locked between anger and fear. The image of a desperate woman and a raised weapon drags him into an old memory. Far away, in a sun-baked military compound, an auburn-haired woman sleeps peacefully beneath white sheets, unaware of the tragedy waiting outside. In that remembered bedroom, morning light spills across Tae-hee as she buries her face in the blankets. A younger Yuseong, dressed in desert camouflage and wearing the same striking blue eye, gently shakes her awake and calls her his sleepyhead. Tae-hee groans that he's leaving for work, then lifts herself with a teasing smile when he asks whether she won't see him off. The scene is warm, ordinary, and painfully intimate, the kind of happiness Yuseong can only revisit after it has already been destroyed. Tae-hee tugs Yuseong close by his uniform and reminds him that this is the final day of his military assignment. The thought of finally traveling together the next morning makes her face glow. Yuseong blushes and promises he'll come straight home as soon as the mission ends, admitting he's exhausted with the place and eager to leave with her. Tae-hee says she'll wait in something pretty for the occasion, then pulls him closer for one last private moment before he goes. Their farewell lingers beyond reason. Tae-hee wraps herself around Yuseong and jokes that if he stays, he'll only anger his captain, but neither of them wants to let go. He laughs that worrying will only create more trouble, while she insists he should make certain she's fully energized before leaving. They trade gentle kisses in the amber-lit room, treating the morning like a promise of everything ahead. Neither realizes that these playful words are becoming the final tenderness they will ever share. Hours later, Yuseong adjusts his cap at the door and tells Tae he's leaving. Wrapped in a sheet, she waves brightly and promises to wait for him. Then the memory fractures. In the desert, a masked man presses a weapon against Tae while another orders Yuseong to drop his rifle. His blue eye widens beneath his helmet. Somehow the attackers reached the house, found the woman waiting there, and turned his happiest secret into a weapon against him. The masked captor counts down while Tae cries for Yuseong not to surrender. At the final second, Yuseong lets his rifle fall and demands that they release her. The captor laughs at the so-called blue-eyed soldier for believing he could escape after losing his leverage. He reveals that they planted traps at Yuseong's home, but found Tae instead. A trusted partner has sold him out, and the hostage was never part of a negotiation. She was bait meant to break him. The traitor sneers that he has always wanted an Asian beauty beside him and calls Tae the perfect reward. Yuseong's eye burns with furious rage as he launches himself forward, but a deafening crack echoes through the desert. The betrayer falls face first into the dust, yet Tae also slumps against the earth with fresh crimson spreading across her dress. Yuseong reaches her too late. The trap is over, the enemies are down, and victory means nothing because the person he came to save is already slipping away. Tae trembles in Yuseong's arms, tears mixing with the crimson at her lips. With the last of her strength, she smiles and tells him she loves him. Yuseong screams her name as that final expression brands itself into his blue eye. The memory snaps back to Hayeon standing with a weapon aimed at herself, another woman ready to fall while looking directly at him. Unable to repeat the same nightmare, Yuseong closes his eyes and agrees to help. Hayeon stares at him, stunned that her desperate gamble worked. Hayeon asks how she can trust his sudden promise. Yuseong answers that if he intended to lie, he wouldn't bother helping at all. He also points out that the weapon can't discharge a real round, proving he understood her bluff before she did. Hayeon backs toward the doorway and warns Reina not to approach, insisting she'll still pull the trigger. The mechanism clicks, and a harmless dummy round tumbles out. Yuseong crosses the room, seizes her wrists, and asks whether she truly thought he would let her gamble her life so recklessly. Holding Hayeon's shaking hands between his own, Yuseong scolds her for taking a potentially grave action without understanding the consequences. Then he repeats the promise. He'll help her take revenge, but only under strict conditions. Hayeon's anger gives way to breathless relief. Yuseong explains that her current weakness makes her a danger to herself, so she must first recover and train under him. Reina protests as Hayeon nearly exposes herself in her excitement, but Hayeon accepts before hearing the rest. Anything is worth it if the path ends with justice for Nayeon. Yuseong tells Hayeon to remember that training begins as soon as her body recovers. When she immediately asks what he knows about the culprit, he orders her to address him properly and announces that questions aren't allowed. He turns to Reina and suggests they get food, leaving Hayeon sputtering behind them. She corrects herself and calls him captain, but he still refuses to explain. Reina laughs that this is simply how he is, then helps Hayeon fix her robe as Hayeon realizes her new alliance comes with maddening rules. Morning sunlight fills Yuseong's dining room as Hayeon, Reina, and Yuseong share a quiet breakfast. Reina apologizes for preparing only a modest spread, but Hayeon clutches her robe closed and insists she's grateful for both the meal and their help. Reina mentions washing the clothes Hayeon wore during the attack and promises to return them once dry. Hayeon wishes she could repay such kindness. Yuseong tears a bread roll in half and asks whether she knows how to cook, clean, and handle laundry, turning her gratitude into an unexpected job interview. Hayeon stares at him, confused, until Yuseong explains that Reina is leaving next week for medical volunteer work. Since Hayeon will remain in his home for training, she can repay them by taking over the household chores. He reminds her that he saved her first, so some work is the least she owes him. Hayeon reluctantly agrees. Then Yuseong finally gives her the name she has been desperate to hear, Cha Taeju, a former colleague and friend from the same military company. Hayeon's eyes widen as Yuseong admits he hasn't kept in contact with Taeju since leaving the military and doesn't know his current location or activities. Finding him may take time, but Yuseong promises he will. Hayeon asks why he would help eliminate someone he once called a friend. Yuseong explains that their work follows one rule: civilians must never be involved. Taeju crossed that line. Friendship no longer protects him, and although targeting an innocent alone isn't full justification, Hayeon's demand for revenge completes the debt. Yuseong invokes the law of retaliation. A person may repay exactly what they've received. That's how their world works. He orders Hayeon to pack her belongings and return the following week, and she answers with a crisp, obedient, "Yes, Captain." Soon Reina departs overseas, waving goodbye and hoping the pair grow closer. A former international nurse who often volunteers with medical teams in conflict zones, she travels frequently. Hayeon keeps her promise, moves into the captain's house, and begins training with punishing runs up a forested mountain trail. Sweat pours from Hayeon as she doubles over on a wooden staircase and begs Yuseong to stop. She thought revenge training meant learning marksmanship and combat, not endless running. Yuseong stands above her without sympathy and explains that her sluggish body couldn't hit a target even after 100 shots. Cha Taeju is roughly 100 times stronger than she is, so her first task is building enough stamina to survive a single opportunity. He reminds her that she agreed to obey every order, then tells her to quit arguing and run. Hayeon grits her teeth, shouts, "Yes, Captain," and chases Yuseong up the steep stairs despite her burning lungs. The chase continues until moonlight replaces the autumn sun. Back at the house, her leg shakes so violently she can barely squat, but Yuseong calmly orders 100 push-ups while eating a snack from the sofa. Hayeon stares at him in disbelief. After all that running, lowering her body once already feels impossible, yet her merciless instructor treats the real training as though it has only begun. Hayeon forces herself through the push-ups until her arms collapse and her face nearly hits the mat. She wonders how any human being keeps pace with this punishment. When she manages only one trembling repetition, she looks up and finds Yuseong on the floor beside her, matching the exercise without effort. She asks what he's doing, and he simply tells her to continue with him. Through exhaustion, Hayeon notices the smallest soft spot beneath his harsh discipline, though his next command quickly makes her regret finding it. Yuseong announces that he'll complete 100 repetitions, and if Hayeon hasn't finished by the time he does, she must start again. Her face twists in horror as he counts smoothly from 2 to 5 while she struggles to move. By the end, the punishment has forced her through 160 push-ups. The next day, she sits among neatly folded laundry with both arms trembling uncontrollably. Every muscle protests, and she mutters that Kwon Yuseong may genuinely be a monster disguised as a trainer. Hayeon collapses face down on the exercise mat and insists she can't train anymore because no strength remains in her arms. Yuseong tells her to get up. She won't need them for the next drill. When she rolls onto her back and repeats that her entire body is empty, he orders 100 sit-ups. To remove every excuse, he sits close, braces her legs against his powerful frame, and begins exercising alongside her. Hayeon flushes as his scarred, sweat-slicked body moves far nearer than she expected. Hayeon tries to focus on her breathing, but each sit-up brings Yuseong's face and bare torso dangerously close. He tells her to hurry unless she wants to remain there all night. She drops back onto the mat, pretending surrender is her only problem, yet she can't ignore how confident he looks during abdominal work. The thought escapes her lips in fragments. Yuseong leans closer, puzzled, and Hayeon jolts when she realizes what she almost admitted. Exhaustion is turning physical proximity into a new kind of hazard. Yuseong asks whether Hayeon intends to lower herself again, and she nervously promises she will. When he rises, a piece of her freshly washed undergarment has somehow caught against his sweat-soaked shirt. Hayeon blurts out a horrified question about what he's doing with it. Yuseong pulls the garment free, equally startled, while her cheeks blaze red. The awkward silence stretches until he says her full name in a low voice. After days of brutal discipline, a ridiculous laundry accident has finally managed to leave both trainer and student defenseless. Yuseong stands over Hayeon after the laundry mishap and says her full name with unusual seriousness. When he reaches toward her forehead, Hayeon flinches beneath his large hand, unsure whether he's angry or embarrassed. Instead, he checks her temperature and asks if she's feverish. She slaps his hand away and snaps that he should have worried during yesterday's brutal workout. Yuseong drapes the stray garment over her head, remarks that her face is bright red, and orders her to finish folding the laundry before making him food. Yuseong walks away as if nothing happened, leaving Hayeon hidden beneath the white cloth with her cheeks burning. She mutters that he's an infuriatingly cold man who occasionally reveals an almost gentle side. The contradiction unsettles her more than his cruelty would. Outside, a full month passes in golden autumn light. Hayeon continues running mountain stairs behind Yuseong, astonished that the distance between them keeps shrinking. What once looked impossible now feels like simple pursuit, though she still suspects her captain possesses superhuman lungs. At the top of the trail, Hayeon bends over to catch her breath, while Yuseong stands upright without strain. She suggests spicy noodles for lunch and then adds pancakes, cheerful enough to talk about food between exercises. He dryly says he has trained her well. Their conversations have become almost normal, and Hayeon realizes the frightening captain has become familiar company. Yet during sit-ups that evening, Every repetition brings his face close enough for her to count his breaths, leaving her unsure whether to meet his eyes or stare anywhere else. Hayeon worries that at this rate, she'll memorize every pore on Yuseong's face. Later, alone beneath a steaming shower, she studies the stronger body her month of training has created. Her movements feel lighter and more controlled, and revenge no longer seems impossibly distant. But when she imagines finally facing Cha Taeju, hesitation slips into the thought. Hayeon covers her face with wet hands, furious at herself. The moment should inspire determination, yet some new emotion is blurring the clean certainty she once had. The shower beats down as Hayeon interrogates her own weakness. Why would she hesitate now, after coming this far? In her mind, Naeon's memory demands that she show no mercy and repay Taeju with the same decisive action that took her sister. Hayeon's gaze hardens beneath the water. Whatever comfort or attachment has grown inside Yuseong's home can't be allowed to soften the purpose that brought her there. She pushes away the doubt and promises herself that when the moment arrives, revenge must still come first. That evening, Yuseong grills meat outside beneath the glowing autumn trees, while Hayeon watches from a small campsite table. She marvels at the peaceful life people must enjoy when every day feels like this: tea beneath a clear sky, food under the stars, and someone quietly beside them. Smiling, she raises a can of beer and asks whether this is some special occasion, especially since Yuseong normally refuses alcohol. He calls it a celebration. Hayeon has finally passed the physical portion of her training. Hayeon's eyes widen when Yuseong confirms that tactical instruction begins tomorrow. At last, she thinks, the real training is starting. Yuseong tells her to eat before the food gets cold, but she pops open another drink and offers him a toast. She thanks him for continuing to work with her and celebrates the progress they've made together. Yuseong lifts his can with a guarded expression, while Hayeon's smile carries more relief than triumph. For one evening, their dangerous objective feels almost like a shared future. Night settles around the campfire after Hayeon finishes her first drink. Her cheeks flush and her cheerful teasing grows louder, prompting Yuseong to observe that she can't hold alcohol. She insists one can is harmless and invites him to enjoy the food he grilled so perfectly, joking that he should cook more often. Yuseong reminds her that talking back is forbidden. Hayeon laughs, promises it won't happen again, then immediately talks back once more. The captain can't believe a single drink has transformed his disciplined student into a fearless nuisance. The fire crackles as Hayeon's laughter fades and tears suddenly fill her eyes. She confesses to Naeon that beneath all her brave promises, she's terrified. Her desire to punish Taeju hasn't changed, but the thought of finally meeting him frightens her, and even finding a route to revenge has made her resolve feel fragile. Yuseong listens from the shadows and calls her sister pitiful enough to stir sympathy. Then his voice softens. Fear is understandable, he says, and Hayeon doesn't have to face it alone. He'll remain beside her, so she mustn't give up. Hayeon wipes her tears and mutters that Yuseong is a frustratingly tender scoundrel. When he asks what she said, she beams and thanks her captain instead. Their cans tap together, and Hayeon praises the meal while demanding to know why he rarely cooks. After the fire burns low, they sit quietly under their hoods. Hayeon asks permission for one question and explains that while cleaning his room, she discovered a photograph. Her careful tone immediately changes Yuseong's face, revealing that the image touches a wound deeper than she realizes. The remembered photograph shows Tae is sitting close beside a younger Yuseong, both of them relaxed and smiling in sunlight. Hayeon asks whether the beautiful woman was his girlfriend, then assumes she must be an ex now because Reina is in his life. The question draws a sharp, wounded glare across the fire. Yuseong grips his drink and asks what Hayeon is really curious about, the woman in the photograph or him. His response leaves her frozen. Tae isn't an old romance he discarded. She's a loss he still carries everywhere. Beside the dying campfire, Hayeon repeats her innocent question about the beautiful woman in Yuseong's photograph and guesses that she must be an ex-girlfriend now that Reina is around. Yuseong's face tightens before he asks whether Hayeon is curious about the woman or about him. Her drunken confidence vanishes. She waves both hands and insists the photograph merely caught her attention because its subject was so beautiful. Yuseong reminds her that he and Reina are only colleagues, then asks why she keeps pretending not to understand that. Hayeon flushes beneath her hood and protests that she assumed Yuseong and Reina shared some secret relationship. Annoyed by his knowing smile, she takes another long drink. The fire snaps between them, and Yuseong's amusement fades into confession. People have lost their lives because of him, he says, because he once acted recklessly and foolishly. Hayeon lowers the can, suddenly sober. No matter how much he missed Tae-hee or wanted her beside him, bringing someone precious into a dangerous combat zone was a choice he can never forgive himself for making. Yuseong explains that Tae-hee's last words were, "I love you," spoken moments after a projectile struck her chest. Her passing forced him to abandon both rage and revenge. As a mercenary, countless people lost their lives because of his actions, and many of them must have been precious to someone else too. He no longer believes he deserves to blame anyone or grieve as though his pain is unique. That's why he once told Hayeon to move on and live as he does. His cold advice was never indifference. It was guilt speaking through him. Tears spill down Hayeon's cheeks as she apologizes for prying, but gratitude follows the sorrow. Yuseong didn't only rescue her from the alley. He's helping her reach justice, making her train, and forcing her to promise she won't perish. His support has kept her standing when grief would have swallowed her. Hayeon reaches for his sleeve, struggling to explain what all of that means. Yuseong gently cups her face, wipes away a tear with his thumb, and tells her he understands. She doesn't need to keep crying in front of him. Hayeon steps closer until her hands rest against Yuseong's chest. Their faces hover inches apart, both of them breathing through the silence. Then Yuseong leans in and presses his lips to hers. Hayeon's eyes fly open, her fingers freezing against his jacket, while the campfire throws warm light across their flushed faces. The moment ends as suddenly as it began. Yuseong turns away and says the night is cold, urging her inside. But Hayeon remains rooted to the ground, stunned by the tenderness he refuses to acknowledge. As Yuseong starts walking, he quietly admits that he has been holding back too. Hayeon wipes at her tears and calls herself foolish for trying to confess to her captain while intoxicated. When she looks up, Yuseong has returned. He takes her face in both hands and kisses her again, this time with unmistakable intention. The apology, the grief, and the tension between them collapse into one answer neither can pretend was accidental. Yuseong's restraint breaks precisely because Hayeon's honesty reaches the part of him still trapped with Tae-hee. Inside the softly lit bedroom, Yuseong stops beside the bed and asks why Hayeon followed him instead of returning to her own room. She twists the zipper cord of her hoodie, cheeks burning, and points out that they were just kissing. How could he simply walk away after that? Her question draws him back. He closes the distance and kisses her once more, one hand supporting her face while the other steadies her waist. Hayeon's nervous confusion gives way to a willingness to remain exactly where he brought her. Yuseong says her full name, and Hayeon answers with a breathless, "Yes, Captain." He tells her there will be no more tears from now on. Training with a weapon requires concentration, and emotional distress will ruin her aim, so she must pull herself together. Hayeon watches him turn toward the door, realizing he has used discipline to retreat from intimacy again. Now that she followed him this far, he asks what she actually wants. The captain's directness forces her to say what the kisses have already made clear. Hayeon demands to know why Yuseong kissed her and whether he genuinely likes her. She can't tell if it was pity, alcohol, sincerity, or another attempt to comfort her. Before she can finish, Yuseong steps forward and kisses her again, ending the argument with action. Then he admits the truth. He likes her. At first, he only wanted to help, but before he recognized the change, concern became attachment. He started wanting to protect Hayeon and remain beside her for reasons that reach far beyond revenge. Yuseong admits that some part of him may be trying to overcome his past through Hayeon, but he still asks her to believe that his feelings are real. Their fingers touch, and Hayeon gives him a test instead of an answer. If he means it, he must not tell her to return to her room. He must let her stay here. Yuseong's eye widens at the challenge. Hayeon meets his gaze without flinching and promises that if he lets her remain, she'll trust his confession. Hayeon slowly pulls down the zipper of her hoodie and asks Yuseong to stay beside her for the night. He catches her hand and draws her close, one arm supporting her back as her body tilts toward him. This time he doesn't retreat behind orders or grief. He tells Lee Hayeon not to leave and asks her to remain with him. Her fingers tighten around the fabric at his chest while he holds her securely, and the relationship built from suspicion, debt, and revenge crosses into something neither of them can easily undo. Yuseong catches Hayeon before she can retreat and asks her not to leave. His voice loses its usual command as he quietly tells her to stay with him tonight. Hayeon's hesitation melts beneath the sincerity in his eyes, and she lets him pull her close. Their kiss deepens, carrying them from the doorway toward the bed. For once, neither revenge nor training stands between them. The guarded captain and his stubborn trainee finally surrender to the feelings they've both been hiding. As they settle beside each other, Hayeon remains overwhelmed by how quickly the distance between them disappears. Yuseong's touch is confident, yet he watches her reactions carefully, giving her room to stop him. She doesn't pull away. Instead, the warmth they've denied for weeks draws them closer, turning their first honest confession into something more profound. The room grows quiet around them, and every lingering glance confirms that this isn't a careless impulse, but a choice they're making together. Hayeon reaches toward the striking blue eye that fascinated her from the moment they met. She admits that she's wanted to say the same thing ever since that night, then asks him to look at her and confess properly. When Yuseong pretends not to understand, she tells him exactly what she wants. He must say that he likes her too. His answer comes without words as he removes another barrier between them, leaving Hayeon blushing and suddenly unable to meet his gaze. Embarrassed, Hayeon insists that she practically confessed already, but Yuseong wants there to be no misunderstanding between them. If this continues, he wants them to begin truly learning about one another beyond the roles of captain and trainee. His seriousness steadies her. Hayeon finally says it plainly. She likes him. The admission leaves her breathless, yet Yuseong's expression softens with relief. He leans closer, accepting her feelings and answering them with the tenderness he can't put into words. Their restraint gives way as the night continues, though Yuseong still follows Hayeon's pace. She calls for him to wait when the intensity becomes overwhelming, and he pauses long enough to read the uncertainty on her face. Beneath her nervousness, however, she isn't asking him to leave. She reaches back for him, choosing trust over fear. What began as a desperate alliance for revenge now becomes a deeply personal bond, one neither of them expected when he carried her home. Yuseong studies Hayeon's flushed expression, surprised by how completely she has lowered her guard. She is equally startled by the vulnerability behind his usual composure. When he tries to lead again, she stops him and asks for a moment. The pause isn't rejection. Hayeon wants to meet him as an equal, not simply follow another command. For the first time since agreeing to his harsh conditions, she pushes back for reasons that have nothing to do with training, and Yuseong listens. Gathering her courage, Hayeon announces that it's her turn to take the lead. Yuseong smiles and reminds her that he isn't finished, but she refuses to surrender the moment so easily. If he wants things to be fair, she tells him to sit still. Her sudden confidence catches him off guard, and she closes the distance before he can object. The shift turns their familiar struggle for control into playful affection, revealing how naturally their stubborn personalities fit together. Hayeon's boldness leaves Yuseong visibly shaken, and she realizes that even the unflappable captain can lose his composure. She keeps control of the moment, determined to return the care and attention he has shown her. Yuseong grips the bedding and tries to endure her teasing confidence, but his strained expression betrays him. The balance between them changes again. Hayeon is no longer merely the wounded woman he rescued, but someone capable of challenging him in every part of their new relationship. The playful contest continues, each of them refusing to be the first to yield. Hayeon presses forward with surprising determination, while Yuseong struggles to maintain the discipline that defines him. Every reaction encourages her, yet the tenderness beneath their rivalry remains unmistakable. His expression makes their affection unmistakable. Hayeon accepts the challenge, and the pair remain close together until the outside world feels distant. Their mission against Cha Taeju still looms ahead, but their alliance has now become something far more dangerous to lose. And that's where we'll leave them for now. If this one hit you right, you already know the move. Tap subscribe. The next obsession drops twice a week, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. I pulled 2 more recaps just for you. They're on your screen right now. Pick your poison. This was Manhwa Dragon. Stay obsessed. I'll see you in the next one.